on how to resolve the issues bedeviling the IEBC and ensure the Commission is fully constituted. There's also the Moraga advisory to dissolve Parliament, which if eventually acted on would see the matter fall on the Commission. To talk more about the state of the electoral body, I'm now joined live by the former IEBC CEO Ezra Chiloba. Many thanks for joining us here on News Desk this afternoon. It seems now, with just 3 commissioners in office, a failure of Parliament to reconstitute IEBC in good time may just come back to haunt the country. How would you term the state of IEBC amid the current political developments?
Thank you very much, first of all, for having me for this particular session. I would say that, first of all, I also need to correct that we're not 2 years away to the next election. We're actually 21 months away to the next election. And 21 months means that we are getting that red zone in terms of preparations. So we are generally looking at the state of things. We are not in a good place as a country if we have to have elections in 2022 August. So what I see is that we're going to be confronted with a situation which I always term as the uncharted territory. We might find ourselves in a place where we've never been before, which is basically getting to the election. But when you look at the state of play, nothing is ready to get us through that particular process. Yeah, it's something that is concerning as we speak right now.
For failing to treat the institution with the seriousness it deserves. I mean, the commissioners, they're saying it is unfortunate that politicians treat elections as an emergency. Have you seen the political goodwill? Because the last general election was described largely as a shambolic election. Many saying that IEBC now needs to redeem itself in the eyes of Kenyans. How would you, say, what is your thought about how politicians have treated the IEBC issue since the 2017 general elections?
No, I mean, it's not just since 2017 general election. I think it goes way back to 1992. If you see that at every given moment when we're getting ready for elections, a negotiation is always had on the Electoral Commission, who is going to run the next election. But unfortunately, that decision is always left until too late in the day. And this is the situation in which we find ourselves in. While we've been talking about reforms and strengthening the institutions that run elections in this country for the last 10 or so years, we seem to be going back to the same situation, making the same mistakes, waiting until too late. And this state kind of puts a lot of pressure on whoever will be responsible for managing elections. So I look at it as the responsibility of Parliament, first of all, to ensure that the necessary legal framework is in place to facilitate the recruitment of or setting up a commission that will be able to help us go through this particular process, and as well as attending to certain legal reforms arising from the challenges that we faced in 2017 elections. So far, you don't see any significant movement towards that, and yet we have 21 months to the next election. So that challenge remains. It's not just about the political goodwill. I think is the political goodwill and the action that has to be taken. And we are more than late. And of course, there are other issues that we need to also resolve. It's not just about the status of the Commission, but look at the issue of technology in elections, which became a major issue in the last election. And if we do not resolve that issue, one, as to whether we're going to have to use election technology again in the coming election or not, and if we're going to use that technology in the next election, the question will be, are we going to reuse the system that we had for the 2017 election, or are we going to procure? Unless you make that decision in good time, which to me, you only have like 2 months or so to go, the Commission will be ill prepared to handle the complex election that is coming ahead.
Because we've already had talks of possibly reusing the previous equipment that we had. But let's talk about the tragedy that awaits, the crisis in the country. Because so far we have 6 by-elections slated for December, among them the Msambweni by-election. We have talk of a referendum with the Building Bridges Initiative and several other, proposals for a referendum in the country. And that is before the general elections, which you say are 21 months away. Is IEBC, as currently constituted, able to conduct not just the elections, but also a referendum?
Well, I got my own views about the state of the Commission at the moment. I know they've issued statements saying that they are ready to run elections at any given point in time. They are ready to run a referendum. But again, when you look at the sequence of things that are supposed to be done, the question is whether you can actually do all these things at the same time and still run a successful election. My view has always been that the Commission has to provide a robust public statement in terms of where it stands and in terms of the practical things that is actually putting in place to ensure that it is prepared. And this will include also sharing the information with the critical stakeholders as a matter of concern, as opposed to just issuing statements and yet you see very little movement in that particular direction. So my take, the challenge for the Commission now is to tell us, for example, what it will take to be able to run a referendum and when specifically that has to happen. If we have to ensure that we run the referendum, then we have an election. How do you sequence those particular processes without causing challenges to the eventual election program? So my take is that the Commission now bears a responsibility to update the country in terms of election preparedness, in terms of the operations, for assuming that we're going to proceed with the current legal framework. Just tell us, these are the things we need to do. This is what we are required to be able to carry out our mandate in the next few months, even as we approach the election. So far, nothing has been forthcoming, and I think we're leaving a lot of people behind.
All right, let's talk about the advisory by Chief Justice David Moraga, one that legal experts say is likely, if implemented, to throw the country into crisis. I mean, because that would mean massive by-elections in the country. What is your thoughts on that development and how IEBC is likely to handle it with just 3 commissioners in office?
Well, it's the same challenge. Now, let us say that there's desire to have a by-election across the country following Chief Justice's advisory. Then let us also assume that we're going to have a referendum thereafter. And then we're going to have the August 2022 elections. How are you going to combine those processes together to ensure that it actually happens? If it happens and it succeeds, I mean, it will take a miracle for us to be able to get there. Where we stand, we need to be pragmatic as a country and say there are certain things that we can do given the limited time that we have. And there are certain things that we have to wait until maybe next time we make an attempt. And here you have now to look at, do you want to have a national by-election? Do you want to have the referendum? Do you want to have the election? Which of those, and by the way, there are other activities that the Commission ought to have addressed, which includes boundary delimitation. So at least last year they mentioned that perhaps we may not have boundary delimitation exercise taking place before the next election. But if there's political pressure to include that as well, then you can say that the country is ill prepared to handle major electoral events within a period of 21 months.
All right, that is former IEBC CEO Ezra Chiloba there speaking to us about the state of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission amid various political developments in the country, some calling for a referendum and the possible advisory there by Chief Justice David Moraga on the dissolution